We thought that the shooter was going to come row by row and just kill us.
This is an actual eyewitness account of the 2012 Aurora mass shooting that occurred on July 12, 2012, taking 12 lives and injuring 70 people. The shooter is known as James Holmes. There is an entire crazy story around James Holmes. He had no criminal record before this incident. For whatever reason, he booby-trapped his apartment with explosives before the shooting. The explosives was later defused by a bomb squad. To have an exact picture of what happened in the Aurora Theater in 2012, let's watch the witness of a young lady who almost lost her husband to the incident.
Okay, so tell us about what you saw in terms of somebody stepping in the movie theater.
I saw somebody step in and the canister was thrown over our heads. And at that moment I was leaning to Ashley to tell her, I think someone's playing a prank right now, like someone's going to do a prank that's going to be really funny, you know. And as he stepped in, I just knew something was very wrong. It was almost like it was in slow motion as the canister was going over. He stepped in the doorway, and I knew something was wrong, so I put my arm around Ashley, and I threw her to the ground.
And what do you remember after you threw Ashley to the ground?
I remember the canister exploding somewhere behind us, and that the gunshots started immediately after.
And do you have any experience with firearms?
We grew up with them. We lived in a small town, and my parents had them and taught us about them.
Had you ever heard gunfire before?
Yes.
Is what you heard in that night at the theater on July 19th and July 20th of 2012 consistent with the gunfire that you have experience hearing?
Yes.
And so what did that sound like to you at the time?
It was just a lot of gunfire. It was clear. It was gunshots, a lot of them.
Now, could you see anything from where you were on the floor at that time, or could you just hear things?
Well, as I was going down to the floor with Ashley, I saw him step in. He was wearing a mask and Kevlar, and I saw him with a gun, and it was a longer gun, and I could see that there was a scope on there also.
And you had a clear view of that at the time?
I did.
Okay.
It happened really fast, so it's hard to describe, but yeah.
Now, you've been testifying in terms of you saw him. At the time, did you know if it was a male or a female?
No, I did not. And we didn't know if there were more than one either. We just knew. I just saw that one person.
Did you see anyone other than that one person?
No.
So what do you remember after you saw that and you and Ashley were on the ground?
So we were kind of huddled together laying on the ground, and I turned to my left to talk to my husband to decide what we were going to do next. And that's when I saw that he was still sitting in his chair. I saw that his shoes were on the ground and like his feet were on the ground, and he was still sitting in his chair. And I couldn't understand why he was sitting in his chair when someone was shooting. You know, he should have been on the ground with us.
And what do you remember after seeing him? Were you able to see him clearly at that point in time, or could you just tell that he was sitting in the chair?
At that moment, I could tell he was sitting in the chair, and then I looked up because I wanted to ask him, like, what are you doing? Why are you still sitting in the chair? And that's when I saw blood pouring from his face, and I knew that he had been shot in the head.
And what do you remember after you saw that?
I remember that he wasn't breathing, and that I told Ashley that Caleb's dead. They said he's dead. He's been shot in the head.
And what'd you do after you told Ashley that?
We stayed crouched on the ground because there was still a lot of gunfire happening. So we just crouched down waiting because we thought that the shooter was going to come row by row and just kill us.
And then what do you remember while you guys were down crouched on the ground after that?
It's a little confusing to put all together just because it was a lot that was happening. I remember that the air was very thick and it was hard to breathe, and that it It was hard to stay crouched because I was so pregnant. I was trying not to lay on my stomach. I remember at one point that I saw the shooter walk by our row, and we believe that he went out into the lobby of the theater.
Now, you said you believe that. Did you actually see that, or is that just what you were guessing at the time?
That's what I assumed at the time because I saw I saw him walk by.
Okay, and so when you say by, was that kind of like it rose behind you?
It was like we were laying on the ground, and I guess from my point of view, it would have been right here because we were on the edge of that row. So we saw feet. I saw him walk by, and I assumed that he went out into the lobby at that time.
So after you thought that he had walked into the lobby, what do you remember after that?
I remember that there were a group of people who ran by our seats and that there was a lot of gunfire again, and we saw them go to the ground. We weren't sure if they had been shot or if they were just crouching on the ground to avoid the gunfire.
And what do you remember after seeing them crouch to the ground?
I remember that we were laying on the ground and we looked behind us, the row behind us, and there was a boy laying on the ground. I don't know how old he was. He was a little bit older, maybe 18 or 19, and someone was laying on top of him, and he just kept on staring at us. We all just kept on staring at each other because we didn't know what to do at that time.
What do you remember after seeing him?
Well, at one point I asked Ashley to call 911, and she said that she had heard other people in the theater already calling 911. And when it got quiet again, I decided to slowly stand up, and I saw that Caleb was actually breathing again. And so I decided he had a lot of blood pouring into his mouth, and he was choking on all of his blood. So I took the bottle of water that he actually purchased earlier, and I poured it in his face to try and get the blood out of his face.
And what do you remember after doing that?
I remember that
This is such a gruesome detail. It feels so crazy to have an account of someone who experienced the shooting. If this is not an evil thing to have done, what else is? The woman, as expected, was probably reliving those memories and fighting back her tears. This kind of experience has a way of putting a scar on people.
I remember that there were the exit door actually opened again, and there were cops at the door that time, and they were yelling and screaming at us to come out of the exit door. Sorry.
Nope, take your time. And what do you remember after the cops told you to come through the exit door?
Well, I told Ashley that we had to make a decision. I could stay or go, but because I was so pregnant, I had to save our unborn child because I thought Caleb was going to die, and I thought to myself, that's going to be the last piece of him that I have to save him. So I grabbed Caleb's hand, and he actually squeezed my hand, and I told him that I loved him and that I would take care of our baby if he didn't make it.
And what do you remember after that?
We ran towards the exit, and we jumped over people that were laying on the ground. I don't know if they were alive or not, but we jumped over their bodies, and we ran to the exit, and I was wearing flip-flops, so I remember as we were running out the exit door that I slipped in blood, and the cop actually caught me because it was a lot of blood.
And what do you remember after the cop catching you and you slipping on blood? What did you do after that?
They set us out on the curb. It was me and Ashley, and then there was a couple out there also, and at one point there was a girl who actually came out and sat next to us also. We know her as Jansen Young now.
At the time, you had just met her for the first time.
Yeah, I didn't know her name. I didn't know her name for a long time, actually.
Okay. And so what happened when you were sitting out on the curb?
They started to bring injured out. The cops started to pull people out onto the sidewalk. And some people they started to load into the car. I remember them loading one girl, and they said, I don't think that she's going to make it. I don't think she's going to make it to the hospital.
And what do you remember after that?
I remember that they pulled Caleb out onto the sidewalk, and that I could see that he was still breathing, but they had to lay him on his face because of all the blood that was just pouring, and so they didn't want him to aspirate.
And then what happened to Caleb when he was out there on the sidewalk?
We actually got moved before we were able to see him loaded anywhere. I had no idea what had happened to him at that time.
So they didn't let you stay with your husband on the sidewalk?
We stayed on the curb for just a few minutes, enough for me to talk to Jansen. She had come out and she sat next to me, and she told me that I think my boyfriend is dead. She's like, I'm pretty sure that he's dead. And I hugged her because I didn't know what else to do. We were all just in shock, not believing this was happening. And so I put my arm around her, and I remember that when I took my arm off her, that there were chunks of blood and of him on me.
And what do you remember after that?
The cop who was with us told us that we had to move out of the location where we were at because they were worried that there was a bomb in a car right near where we were sitting.
And where did they take you after that?
They took us to, it was more towards like the front of the building, but at the back of the parking lot. And that was the last time I saw Caleb at that time for many hours.
And did you know what had happened to Caleb at that point in time?
No.
So at some point in time, were you moved from the theater to another location?
I was.
And where were you taken?
We were taken to the high school, a high school. I don't know. They bussed us up to a high school. They made sure there was a small group of us that knew we had severely injured people that we were with, and they took us in a special group up to the high school first.
And what happened when you were at the high school?
They took us into the gym and gave us water, and I really had to use the bathroom because I was so pregnant, so they escorted me and Ashley to the bathroom. And I remember that I had a lot of blood on my hands from Caleb, and I couldn't scrub hard enough to get it all off.
And at some point in time, were you interviewed by police officers at Gateway High School?
I was.
And then eventually, were you able to leave Gateway High School early that morning?
I was. After chatting with my mom, I had called them earlier when I was outside of the theater. I called my mom, and that was one of the hardest things I ever had to do, was calling my parents and calling Caleb's parents, because they all thought that I was calling to tell them that I was going into labor. And instead, I got to tell them all that Caleb had been shot and was probably dead.
So after you were at Gateway High School, you were able to call, and were you able to get someone to come get you, or?
Yeah, I talked to my mom, and she told me that Caleb had been taken into surgery and that he was alive, and they came to pick us all up, me and Ashley.
And where were you taken?
They took us to University Hospital.
And what did you learn when you got to University Hospital?
That Caleb had been out of surgery, but then they had to take him back in before I got there again. So by the time that I arrived at the hospital, he was already in his second surgery.
This is such an emotional one. Her husband eventually lost the ability to talk and even walk, due to the brain damage from the gunshots he suffered. The craziest thing was how James Holmes himself refused to testify at all in the case, but all the evidence tendered was enough for justice.
Have you discussed with any of them or all of them whether or not you will testify?
Yes.
Have you had enough time to discuss this matter with them?
Yes.
Do you need more time to talk to your attorneys about this matter?
No.
Have you made a decision as to whether or not you will testify?
Yes,
And what is your decision?
I choose not to testify.
Is that a voluntary decision?
Yes,
Is that a decision that was made as a result of pressure or influence or threats or promises or coercion?
no,
Do you have any questions for me?
no,
Do you understand both your right to testify and your right not to testify in this trial?
yes,
After a long court trial, the jury was torn over either death penalty or life sentencing. It's crazy how that should be a debate for someone who mass murdered 12 people, injured 70 people at a go. Probably due to a mental illness. Regardless, this sentence was eventually passed.
Final sentencing verdict form, count 1, murder in the first degree after deliberation. Jonathan Blanc, we the jury do not have a unanimous final sentencing verdict on this count, and we the jury understand that as a result, the court will impose a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on this count. Final sentencing verdict form, count 2, murder in the first degree after deliberation, Alexander Boyk. We, the jury, do not have a unanimous final sentencing verdict on this count, and we, the jury, understand that as a result, the court will impose a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on this count. Final sentencing verdict form, count 3, murder in the first degree after deliberation, Jesse Childress. We, the jury, do not have a unanimous final sentencing verdict on this count, and we, the jury, understand that as a result, the court will impose a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on this count. Final sentencing verdict form, count 4, murder in the first degree after deliberation, Gordon Cowden. We, the jury, do not have a unanimous final sentencing verdict on this count, and we, the jury, understand that as a result, the court will impose a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on this count. Final sentencing verdict form, count 5, murder in the first degree after deliberation, Jessica Gowie. We, the jury, do not have a unanimous final sentencing verdict on this count, and we, the jury, understand that as a result, the court will impose a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on this count. Final sentencing verdict form, count 6, murder in the first degree after deliberation, John Larimer. We, the jury, do not have a unanimous final sentencing verdict on this count, and we, the jury, understand that as a result, the court will impose a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on this count. Final sentencing verdict form, count 7, murder in the first degree after deliberation, Matthew McQuinn. We, the jury, do not have a unanimous final sentencing verdict on this count, and we, the jury, understand that as a result, the court will impose a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on this count. Final sentencing verdict form, count 8, murder in the first degree after deliberation, Michaela Merrick. We, the jury, do not have a unanimous final sentencing verdict on this count, and we, the jury, understand that as a result, the court will impose a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on this count. Final sentencing verdict form, count 9, murder in the first degree after deliberation, Veronica Mosher Sullivan. We, the jury, do not have a unanimous final sentencing verdict on this count, and we, the jury, understand that as a result, the court will impose a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on this count. Final sentencing verdict form, count 10, murder in the first degree after deliberation, Alex Sullivan. We, the jury, do not have a unanimous final sentencing verdict on this count, and we, the jury, understand that as a result, the court will impose a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on this count. Final sentencing verdict form, count 11, murder in the first degree after deliberation, Alexander Teves. We, the jury, do not have a unanimous final sentencing verdict on this count, and we, the jury, understand that as a result, the court will impose a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on this count. Final sentencing verdict form, count 12, Murder in the first degree after deliberation, Rebecca Wingo. We, the jury, do not have a unanimous final sentencing verdict on this count, and we, the jury, understand that as a result, the court will impose a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on this count.
Many family members of the victims were not satisfied with the sentencing. Of course, it does make a lot of sense that people expected a death sentence, not life imprisonment without possibility of parole. What do you think of this crazy story? Subscribe to this channel if you want more of this video.